On today's episode of Beauty Behind the Brand, we're taking a little twist. We're going to be talking about mortgages with Brianna Goslin today. We're talking about how you can actually find a home as a first-time home buyers, how to actually save money, and also if you're a busy entrepreneur, she can actually help you find the mortgage that suits you best. Now let's dive into this episode so you can learn more about home ownership and/or if you're looking for another building for your busy entrepreneurial life, for your business, this can also help. Okay, I'm excited, Brianna. I'm excited to learn from you as well, to learn all things mortgages. We've met each other actually in person, and I was just saying that it's so nice to actually have someone local in the Muskoka area, as well as just someone I've actually met in person, because I know your energy. I feel like that's another reason why I wanted to have you on. Your Instagram, podcast, everything is amazing, and it's so useful. Like that's something I feel like people like don't realize how simple and digestible content can be when we're talking about mortgages. And that's why I had to have you on, because whether you're a business owner, sole proprietor, you're a contract worker, you're working for someone else as an employer in the beauty industry or any type of industry, really, I think this is a great topic that everyone needs to hear.
Absolutely. I think it's timely considering the affordability of housing right now. But thank you for that. That's such a nice compliment that you find my content approachable. And I think that comes from I have a background in teaching before I entered the mortgage industry. And a lot of what I did, especially throughout COVID, was meeting people where they are and encouraging people to ask questions. So that's really a cornerstone of my business is I listen a lot more. You see me online talking a
Yes,
lot, but I
yeah.
listen a lot more than I speak because I need to find out what you don't know so I can show you what you should know, right? So I thank you. That is such a nice compliment.
Well, let's talk about that too. From going from teacher to now like mortgage specialist. Like how was that transition for you? I know you said your husband's also an accountant as well. Was that kind of like somewhere where you saw yourself going, or it was like just like a natural thing that you were like, I need to do this?
Well, teaching I kind of fell into. I was really fortunate to go through French immersion when I was in school, and then so was bilingual. Grew up in Timmins, Ontario, where there are a
Yeah.
lot of French folks, and then got hired to work in the GTA as a French teacher. So I kind of landed there. It was a great career, but not something that I saw myself doing forever and ever.
Mhm.
And I am kind of like a go, go, go kind of person. And once I was doing it for 10 years, you look at your paycheck and you say, "Oh, wow, this is gonna be the paycheck forever and ever. Amen." So I was not comfortable with that. And I saw my husband being self-employed and I saw him hustling, but in his sweatpants and in a way that like worked for our family. And very quickly, teaching wasn't working for my family. So I made the switch to the mortgage industry. And it's really been a lesson in patience and in building community because of the time when I entered the industry. But it's been really rewarding.
Amazing. And what year was that? That was what year did you officially go
That
out on
was
your own?
2022. So as soon as the 10 consecutive interest rates started hiking, I entered the industry.
Do you know what? Sometimes it's actually better. Like even my sister and I were talking about that with real estate, right? Because there was such that boom in 2020. And then you have that expectation that that's how good it's going to be all the time. And then sometimes it's good to get in when it is a little bit more of that tough times for the industry, because then it makes you so much like that gratitude is there when it is that busy season, the hustle and bustle. And you learn almost you almost have time to digest each thing instead of just like jumping in and being overwhelmed with all the things that are happening. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. And I think like entrepreneurship is really kind of a self discovery journey. And it gave me the time. I mean, you keep busy, right? You're networking, you're building your business, but it really gave me the time to get quiet and kind of figure out what was authentic to me. And I think now, establishing a brand online, it's really been useful because I got to flex that muscle that if I would be inundated with work, I wouldn't have had that time to kind of do
Mhm.
that. So yeah, I'm grateful for that.
We talk about that a lot actually of I even did the same thing actually during the pandemic. I kind of stepped back and really worked on the business instead of like like the day-to-day doing services, because then I was like, whoa, this payment processor doesn't make sense, or this online booking, right? It really makes you digest each little thing that's going on in behind the scenes that people don't see, right? To make your systems and things flow a lot nicer and more fluently as well.
It's not as sexy as making money right away.
Yes.
But I really do believe that if you are building a business and if you're able to build wide and if you're able to put the time in to do things correctly, then when you do start going up and that income starts coming in, then you can build so much higher than somebody who shot up straight to the top by themselves with maybe not the best systems in the beginning. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just a lot to be grateful for.
That's great, and that actually is a great segue into talking about mortgages, because I think that same thing, it's like you're starting to develop that system of income. You're starting to build up that savings account, and it's like, "Oh, it's kind of getting to that point. I'm renting right now," whether that's a commercial space or residential space, and you're like, "Okay, maybe thy next step is to invest in real estate and actually have a mortgage." What are some of those first questions people should be asking themselves, as well as someone like you when they're coming in for an appointment? What are kind of those first things they should be considering when looking into that?
So, like I said, when I speak to clients, especially first-time home buyers, I just tend to listen a lot. I ask them, what's the plan? Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Geographically and financially, like what's going on? And I think the first thing is to think about how you're paid. And I think a lot of people don't recognize how they're paid. You ask them what their annual salary is, and they'll give you a number, but they may not know how that shows up on paper. And in the mortgage world, we need everything on paper. And if you've
Mhm.
applied for a mortgage, you know that we need like all of your documents that you've ever received ever from the government. So those documents, like they really hold a lot of weight. So it's understanding, are you an employee or are you self-employed? That's the first thing, because of course, folks who are self-employed have everybody has a unique payment structure. And then if you have employees and you are paying them, or if you are incorporated, or if you are a sole proprietor, all of these things factor into your mortgage qualification. So that's the first thing. Is I ask, how are you paid? How much are you paid? And how much of that is consistent? And how much of that can we prove? And for everybody, it's different.
Mhm.
Now, the second thing that I ask them is, what are we working with for down payment? Because this can
Yes.
really change the trajectory of your home buying journey. So, typically, first time home buyers are putting down a minimum down payment. And this is great. I always say, if you qualify for this type of mortgage, do it,
Mhm.
because the price of Canadian real estate just is going up and up and up. So, if you can get in, get in. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. If you have
Yeah.
family in real estate, you know, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's a no-brainer. That being said, the insured mortgage is not available to everybody. So you need to qualify on 2 years of what you've claimed to the government. So an average of whatever that amount is, and that'll be your income qualification amount. Now, if you are a business owner and you're keeping some of your money in the business to kind of shelter yourself from taxes, totally cool. I understand. That is literally why I got into the business. There are different ways that we can qualify you. And if you still are wanting to put down a minimum down payment, a cosigner is usually the best route. If you have a family member or someone close to you who's willing to accept some of the liability of the mortgage, then that is usually your best bet. So that's for a minimum down payment.
Okay,
Now,
perfect.
if you are looking at putting down 20% or more, then you have a whole world of lending that opens up to you, including big banks, but also monoline lenders, any alternative lenders, and then private financing, which is for very specific situations. But yeah, so you're looking between 5 and 20% was the long winded answer to your question, Nicole.
Are you needing wellness hacks that are just easy and seamless? Well, let me tell you about SIIP Bone Broth. This is something I can't live without, and it's really easy as they come in their own individual packages for travel, and or if you're going away for a weekend, just throw a couple in your cooler or in your backpack and you're ready to go. They are great for supporting joints, collagen, protein, healthy gut, containing, like I said, high quality protein too. helps with electricity and even electrolytes. And what I love about SIIP is they are actually a husband and wife team out of Toronto, and they are giving us an exclusive discount of 10% off using our promo code Beauty Brand Podcast for 10% off. I have been using it for years. I love it on a cold day. If it's raining out, I love it as just like a little midday pickup, and or even cooking. I love putting it in any chicken noodle soups or any stews that I'm doing or stir fries. It is absolutely amazing with so many benefits. So remember, Beauty Brand Podcast 10 for 10% off SIIP Bone Broth. No, I loved how you explained all of that, because there was a question actually we were talking at work amongst my staff, and they were saying, how long do I have to work somewhere as an employee to be able to then, because I get what you were saying as well, for like when you're self-employed, you really got to make sure that you have your finances in line. And same with me, even I noticed that when I was sole proprietor, that's when I ended up getting our mortgage for our house. But then switching to incorporation and paying myself, my income looks a lot different that way as well. So when it comes to someone as a employee of a business, so let's say one of my staff members at my spa is looking to get a mortgage, how long do they need to be staying at that specific place of employment to be able to get a
So there's
mortgage?
not a cut and dry answer, but
Okay.
the magic number is 2 years. So
Okay.
if you've been there for 2 years and you have 2 years of T4s that shows an employment income from this business, then you're good. If it's
Perfect.
not 2 years, I would still speak to a mortgage agent, because there are different ways and different products that we can qualify you with. And of course, everybody is different. It's like a thumbprint qualifying for a mortgage. So yeah, lots of different options. And as a business owner, I guess this is a good time to mention your first stop really should be a mortgage professional
Mhm.
um, who is independent of the bank. So if that's me, if that's somebody down the street who you feel comfortable with, fine. But they just have many more options. And I actually, a lot of people come to me and they've been told no. So they already have a bad taste in their mouth. And then there's kind of this whole re education process. But you could actually circumvent that, especially as a business owner, because the big banks don't really look at you very kindly if you are a unique person. As you
Mhm.
know, business owners tend to be unique in every way, including income.
Exactly, and that is one of the hardest pills to swallow actually as an entrepreneur and a business owner, because yeah, we look at our numbers and each year can be different. We don't know what like as an employee, like I'm gonna make this much roughly in the year. As a business owner, it could fluctuate a lot within year by year. And I get where the banks obviously have to have their security and know like what's coming in and out. But I think same thing, going to speak to someone who's separate is also a nice way to just even digest more information and learn more about it. Because even real estate too, I find that's like a whole other even just subject on its own, is like a first time home buyer. If you're a single person going to purchase a home, or if you have two incomes, like you said, it's like the thumbprint. There can be so many different things in consideration of your circumstances
And the
looking
other
into it.
thing is if you're working with someone who's independent, then you know they're gonna be there. I mean,
Yes.
I've had my phone number since university. Like, you can always get me, whereas
Hmm.
even when I did my mortgage for my first home, I called the branch where I got my mortgage initially, and it wasn't the same person, and my husband at the time was self-employed, so it's a really tricky situation, a unique situation. We
Hmm.
call it hairy file. Like, there's some stuff that you need to know, some prior knowledge. So if you're working with a mortgage agent or a mortgage broker, then you can consistently contact them. And some of my clients, I mean, I work with them with some of them come in and they buy within the week. And then others, it's months, years where you're coaching them and trying to help them out to obtain ownership. So make sure that you have the relationship with that person too.
Especially when it comes to renewals, like that 5-year renewal period of actually being able to sit and talk to someone who's real as well. Like you're self-employed, you get it, right? Having those conversations like what should we be doing in this, or with interest rates changing, like you being able to, even with your podcast too, it's like you could just listen to you weekly and know what's going on like on those updates. And that's where I think it's so important, is like knowledge is power, right? Like knowing how the numbers work and knowing who to speak to. What are some other things that you've noticed recently that people are coming to you with questions or? kind of.
So on the self-employed side, people who are really, really in the early stages of wanting to apply for a mortgage kind of want to know, how should I set things up?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that you should definitely have is a business account. Your business and your personal account should not be the same thing, even just for tracking your income and seeing kind of what's coming in, invoicing, all those things. It's just like good business financial health to have your own account.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. The second part is your taxes, your income taxes, and it just all has to be paid. If you are trying to close on a property, and you've not paid those income taxes, and then the lender says, "Hey, did you actually get confirmation from the CRA?" and you're about to sign at the lawyer's office, that could be, as you know, a hefty amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you've not put it aside. So put your taxes aside throughout the year and make sure that they're paid before you go to apply for that mortgage. Those are two things that business owners tend to run into quite a bit.
And your bookkeeper will love you for it, and your accountant. 'Cause
Yes.
I was the same because we
Yes.
have our two businesses and then my personal, and we were out for dinner actually having a team dinner. And the girls are like, "Whoa, you have a lot of cards." And I'm like, everything's separate, right? Like I've got like the bank accounts and then they've got credit cards and then I've got my own personal, like to try to allocate it separately as much as we can because it does get very confusing. And that's where people don't see like the back end of the businesses where yeah, when I'm placing orders for products, I'm not going to be placing that through my personal account. That's a business expense, right? And that helps with taxes. And there's just like a whole learning process that is especially first time business owners. Speaking of first time home buyers, first time business owners, it's definitely having that organization is key. And those
And actually, it's about a first time business owners who are fortunate enough to have that influx of revenue. Then they want to become homeowners, which is like amazing.
yes.
But chill a little bit and make sure that everything is kind of organized. And
Mhm.
again, yeah, it's not very sexy, it's not very fun, but it really makes things easier and it makes those goals, those big goals, like way more attainable when you're organized.
Mhm. Even talking about those savings accounts for taxes, like that's why also with talking about incorporations, if you're a sole proprietor talking about taxes, you really got to make sure you're talking to your accountant, anyone really in finance to understand that threshold and where it makes sense for you to start incorporating. Because I've had that conversation so much recently with people. They're like, well, they had paid their taxes, all the things, and they're like, oh, I should have incorporated because I made this much money this year. I'm like, yeah, you made that much money, but now you're paying this much in tax. So that's another thing of figuring out when it does make sense to incorporate versus that sole
Mhm.
proprietorship. And it's a nice growing pain to be able to have that realization, wow, I'm making this much, but then making yourself have a realistic salary coming in so then you can get a mortgage as well, where you're not just throwing everything back into the business.
Exactly, and that's the struggle, right? But I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do it, and I always tell my clients, they get a bit upset, sometimes they haven't claimed enough, so now you need an alternative lender that might have a higher interest rate, but
Mhm.
you have to pay somewhere. I did a reel about this
Yes.
the other day. You have to pay either on the interest or on the tax side. We live in Canada, guys. It is what it is. We are going to be taxed on our money or we are going to be charged more to borrow it.
Mhm.
It is what it is. Unfortunately, sometimes I have to be the bearer of bad news, but you can't save on both.
Mhm. And let's talk about we were talking about capital gains and such a couple weeks ago as well. And when it comes to actually holding real estate as an investment, like I love hard assets as investments. That's just, I think, just because of my family being in real estate and such, where some people like, for example, my like partner, he enjoys more like digital assets. Where
Mhm.
with me, I think also being in Muskoka, I feel like real estate, it just makes sense here. But where does that make sense for someone? Because when they hold on to that for capital gain purposes, it is nice as like a tax exemption. Am I saying that right? Of like with buying and selling as first time home. I'm trying to remember what the logistics are on that.
So I'm the capital gains, I don't think has to do with first time home buyers, but when you have like a rental property.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So if you have an investment property, then you can write off the interest that you're paying on that. So that's really enticing for a lot of people who want to have a second property because then they're able to hold the most amount of mortgage on that property. And I always say to my first time homebuyers, like the first one is the hardest, but
Yes.
once you can leverage the real estate you have, that is where we make, like I get goosebumps talking about it. That's where generational wealth is made.
Mhm.
Is you just leverage those properties, you can refinance them, you can put a home equity line of credit. And this may be kind of above folks who don't own real estate yet, but it's like definitely something to aspire to. And really, that can fund your business, that can fund the big, hairy goals that you have in your business by having these hard assets. Obviously, we're on the same page, Nicole. I am a real estate fan, and I think that it's really the best way to grow your wealth if you are going to hold on to it. I think
Mhm.
that's the second thing that's really important to mention is that really it's a long game. It's a
Yes.
long game. You got to be patient. You have to save that down payment initially, but like even imagine like what it's a $30,000 down payment. What could that be in 10 years? Sorry, I'm getting so excited.
Yeah, no, it's a long-term investment, absolutely, and I think about that all the time where a lot of my friends, for example, or people I know, they're like, "Hey, I've got my mortgage, I've got my house that I'm living in, now let's get a rental property or let's get a commercial space that we can rent out." Like, that's a huge conversation, especially in the beauty industry of, like, suite
Mhm.
rentals where someone can buy, like, almost like a strip mall, for example, and then rent that out for either salon base or spa, like, lashes or whatever. They can rent that out to massage therapists. That's where I'm really starting to see this whole generation of wealth again. What you were saying is like that next step of like, "Okay, I've got the mortgage now. Now my next step is like, what do I do to get to that next level?"
And really savvy first-time home buyers are actually house hacking. So they're
Yes.
using their first property and making sure that it's in what we call an owner-occupied rental. So I did this on my first property when we lived in the GTA because oh my God, even then, which was I don't know how many years ago we bought, but it was so expensive. So we had a basement apartment. And even which is great for just holding on to the property, but when you're qualifying, you can use the rental income from that basement apartment to qualify you. So if you're a
Mhm.
business owner, you're not claiming as much on your taxes, that's also something you can do. And I know that the audience of this podcast, they're often beauty experts, but if you have a business that is, say, say you're a builder or something like that, and you have a property that has potential, or if your partner is a builder or works in construction and it has potential, there are actually mortgage products that we can put you in that will give you some extra money upfront to be able to finish that into an apartment, which is like
Mhm.
that's where the magic happens.
We actually had that question when we got our mortgage because we have we were getting like a finished basement and they said, "Oh, are you going to be renting that out because it has a separate entrance?" We're like, "No, we won't be renting it out." But they're like, "If you ever needed to apply for a mortgage and you get a letter basically from someone saying like, I will rent it for it will help with your mortgage as well to get that pre-approval."
Absolutely, and and in Muskoka, it's great because there's so many unique properties, and then these properties are also usually on considerable land, and if you have a family, even I know that age that I'm in, I have aging parents, like, if I were looking for a property, it might make sense to purchase something like that, rent it out now, and then, when mom and dad need help to move them in, so there's just so
Mhm.
many it opens up, that separate entrance opens up so many doors for opportunities there.
Now, for someone who's listening and they want to book a call with you or anything, do you specifically only work with like people in Ontario or specific areas? Like, I know there's probably different regulations for
That's a good
each one.
question.
I just thinking of, I know a couple listeners that it would be interested in this conversation, but they're like either out west or on the east coast of Canada. So, who are kind of your ideal clients that you're working with, Brianna?
So I work with all Canadians except for if you're in Quebec.
Okay.
Everything's a little bit different in Quebec. So not licensed there through my brokerage, but my brokerage is licensed all across Canada. And I work with lots of first time home buyers as a result of my podcast, but also with current homeowners. There are lots of folks as interest rates have gone up, have a lot of debt, and actually I let lots of people know that they can use their home to help them with that debt to absorb it or to make their monthly affordability roll a little bit better.
Are you thinking about starting a podcast? I remember when we launched Beauty Behind the Brand, it was just an idea at first, and I didn't know where to start or what platform to use or how to streamline everything. Buzzsprout has made our lives so much easier, and I want to share some free info about it. Save $20 on your second invoice with Buzzsprout, and they will make your life so much easier. All you really need to do is upload, chat, and interview your guests, and Buzzsprout does the rest.
Oh, that's like music to people's ears, right? Because there's solutions. It's just finding out the solutions that work best for them.
I always tell my clients, I'm interested, I'm going to listen to your problems, but I'm really not concerned about the problems. Let's go to a solution, like very action oriented. So yeah, that's the approach.
Amazing. Now, when it comes to someone who is looking, like I know in the beauty industry, obviously with like SIIP loans and stuff like that, sadly, there's been a lot of people who weren't able to pay those and now are getting rid of their businesses and then wanting to work from home. That's something a lot of people forget about is like if you have a home office, that can also help with like some of those write-offs with your business as well as writing off some of that expense, right? Let's talk about a little bit that if someone had like a home office that they're using as well as like kind of because you see even that travel back and forth from work that can also help sometimes with some of those tax purposes and having if they had their basement as almost like a spa setup, how that can work as well for their mortgages.
So that's actually on the tax side. So that doesn't factor into the mortgage. But if you are receiving money from your property, you can prove it, then that gives you a chance to use that for qualification purposes, right? That might be something on the alternative side where you're putting down a 20% down payment and then investigating how much of that income a lender will accept. But all of those situations, it's so much easier when you're working with a broker or a mortgage agent because they can have those conversations for you and they can act as a go-between with the lender. And really, I think what people need to remember when they're working with their mortgage financing is that lenders are not working against us or against you. Um, they need to cover their butts and they need to have the correct documentation, but they want to lend you the money, right? Because they're getting paid on that money and I'm getting paid on that money and you are getting the money. So it's really a team effort. And sometimes clients forget that. And if they've had a bad experience with a mortgage professional, um, it can be sticky and it can be really difficult. But I think that's something to keep in mind that, especially if you're working with an independent agent, they want you to succeed and they're on your team.
That's something too, like exactly to that point is like, there's no point of being like mortgage broke. Like there's no point of like where there's like, oh my gosh, I can pay for even I think of that with vehicles with people because one of my other friends helps with mortgages and she's like, this person has a truck payment, for example, because we live in Muskoka. I'm thinking of the most popular vehicle, right? I have a truck payment, especially these young kids, right? I've got this truck payment that basically is a mortgage. Like when you think of what they're lending and how much that is per month, their payments, when they could be driving a beater like I did for 10 years so I could afford a mortgage, right? Of putting that money away and even to paying things off. Like I remember when I went to apply for my mortgage, I had to make sure my car was paid off. I had a snowmobile at the time. I had to make sure that was, I actually ended up selling it, which kind of worked out anyways, but getting rid of the things to make it more affordable for you. So then you're not mortgage broke at the end of the day.
And we're actually looking at not your debt load, we're looking at the payments that you're making. So there
Yes.
are people with these huge student loans and they're saying, oh, I can never get a mortgage. Well, if you're making the minimum payment on that student loan, then it might not affect you as much as, say, the truck. Because can I tell you how many deals, unfortunately, have been killed by a massive truck loan, for which sometimes the client had to have a parent co-sign on a truck loan. And then the mortgage comes and it's more debt. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, again, beaters, not so sexy, but could make you a homeowner quicker.
Oh my gosh, my friends used to rip on me all the time. They're like, "You're still driving that thing?" Because I had the same literally vehicle since university. And I was like, "Yeah," but I'm like, "I have a mortgage. Like I have a house." And they're
Exactly.
driving, yeah, a brand new Mercedes. And I'm like, "Yeah, but you guys are paying for that." Like I've been like I don't have an expense on that vehicle anymore, right? Like it costs me next to nothing. So I think for people yeah, like the whole sexy part, exactly what you're saying. It's like sometimes it has to look unsexy to be sexy to get there, right? It's like that transformation and how to get there. And
And at
it's
the end of the day, what's the goal, right? Is
exactly.
is the goal to have an appearance. And I honestly think that it's maybe a bit easier for us to say this living in Muskoka than living in the GTA because there's a
Yes.
different pressure. But like, really, what's the goal? Is it to be in a home and not paying rent to a landlord, or is it to look the part?
Mhm, mhm. And even too, like some of a lot of my friends actually are renting and they're at the point where they're like, I actually don't mind renting because it's also they don't know where they're going to be in the next few years or they're in transition of jobs. Like if they're working remote and then they're going to go and move somewhere else with a permanent position. There's a time and a place for everything, ages and stages. That's what I always say too, is you don't have to have a mortgage right away. It's like to figure out having those conversations, setting yourself up, start creating that savings account, even if you are renting. Because if you're making those rent payments, transform that into a mortgage payment if you've got that down payment.
Exactly. And on that point, I will mention that if you're looking, even if you're toying with the idea of getting into home ownership, the FHSA, the First Home Savings Account, is something that you should definitely look into.
Okay.
Um, because there are tax breaks and tax initiatives that the government is putting out. So it makes it very attractive for you to invest that way. And then when you're taking the money out, you're not taxed on it, which is great. And you don't have to pay it back in the same way as you do with an RRSP. So that's a
Mm.
new initiative that's come out with the government. It's actually super helpful for first time home buyers, which not all of the initiatives are. So yeah, that's definitely something that people should check out, even if they're thinking of purchasing.
No, that's such a good because like yeah, RSVP like I feel like that was a huge part of our conversations was like, oh, I'm using it or even like a tax-free savings too. Like, right? You're putting money into and maxing out your tax-free savings account. People don't realize that.
Mhm.
It's like I haven't contributed in how many years? What is the max I can now contribute? Can you talk a little bit about that just for people to understand the
Yeah.
tax-free
So
part?
the maximum amount of for tax-free savings account, it changes every year, and you can check in with your financial professional for that. But when you're putting money in, you get a tax break, right? So that's money that's going back into your pocket. And really at tax time, you should be reinvesting that money because it's money that you weren't counting on. Now, when you take money out of the FHSA, which is the first home savings account I was talking about, you then don't even have to pay on tax there. Now, if you are in Canada, you're paying tax everywhere you look. So if there are these opportunities and you can maximize your contribution, then you are getting free money in essence. And
Mhm.
it's not hard. Like, it's really not hard. And if anybody has any questions about how to source an FHSA, where to go, please connect with me because it is a very short conversation and really can make a difference in your purchasing power.
Amazing. I love all of that. Is there any questions I'm not asking that our listeners should know more about? Or I'm just my brain's working like a mile a minute right now because I'm like,
So
oh,
just
that makes
speaking
sense. This, yeah.
Just talking about first-time home buyers, lots of I'd say most first-time home buyers buy with a partner or with a friend. I think it's always important whether you are married, common law, or this person is a platonic friend to get independent legal counsel. And as we are entering into this market that's about to heat up and prices we all know will rise, people are going to have to team up. But I just think it's really important to mention that you should always have your own lawyer. You should have two different lawyers or three different lawyers for every party in the deal. And yeah, make sure you're talking, and then you have that unsexy piece of paper to make sure you're all safe.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think even when you're going into business with someone, we were talking about that the other day in our mentor group. We were talking about people who are sole entrepreneurs versus when they have a partner. And I think of that whether that's like a romantic partner or a business partner. And those are the type of conversations. If you're investing in a piece of property, let's say even a commercial piece of property with a business partner, you've got to get that legal stuff because you never know. Yeah, you might be best friends. It's like you married to this person. It's like your work person, right? It's like your work wife. I always say to the girls at the spa, right? But I'm like, anything can happen and any situation can happen. It's just almost like that security blanket
Because
of knowing.
something likely will happen, and when you have that conversation, it's so much easier to have a piece of paper with you that you can both refer to and feel fair, and it will actually preserve the relationship rather than destroy it. If you can both come in
Yes.
a mature way to the table and then agree on something and be honest with each other about what feels good, then it will continue to feel good because you've done that. Yeah.
And even having those hard conversations, sometimes you might realize if it's worth getting into that mortgage with that person too, right?
That part.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm just trying to think of anything else that comes to mind. Well, I don't want to overwhelm the audience either. We'll probably have to have you back on to talk about, even we can talk about a whole other thing with mortgages, because there's so many layers. There's so many things, as we were even talking today. There's so many topics within that
There's
one
just so
subject.
much. And yeah, that's why I started. So I do have a podcast called Homeowner AF, and it started as an interview podcast and then really just got into the weeds of mortgage mechanics. And it's an accessible resource for first time home buyers. Now, that I'm not currently recording that, but it does live on all podcast platforms. So if folks want to check that out, absolutely they can. And look out for my new podcast, which is called Let's Talk About Money. It's more interview style conversations with different financial professionals and just like everyday people talking about money, because I think more people need to.
Especially females. I don't know how you feel
Right.
in that world, but I feel so awkward sometimes where like I think I was brought up around entrepreneurs as well. So I feel like we talk about money all the time. And I feel like it's such an odd subject for especially women. And it's trying to make it a safe place for them to feel okay to ask questions and not feel belittled almost by that subject.
That's the goal, right? Because I think it's just so overwhelming for people. And I think it's been a male dominated entity. And I think that when women are, they just don't know what they don't know, right? And they feel like
Mhm.
they're starting behind the eight ball. But yeah, I'm always encouraging people, talk to your girlfriends about money, talk to your husband about money. You should be talking to your husband about
Yeah.
money. Talk to everybody about money, because it's really just a tool. It's
Mhm.
just a tool. When you demystify it and you see how you can use it to your advantage, it becomes a powerful tool. So, yeah, I'd love for women to be more vocal about that kind of stuff.
And the mindset of it, actually, we talk about that a lot in my entrepreneur program. We talk about money mindset, and even a lot of the things I gravitate to are about that. And that's exactly what they say. It's a tool. Think of it as a tool, and what you're going to do. It's not even like you have the money. It's like you're using that money to then create more things or to purchase things that are going to help you, your business, your life. Like it's not just the money, it's what the money can do for you.
I could talk to you about that all day, Nicole.
Okay, well, we're going to have you back on. Thank you so much for having. I know you're busy. We were just talking about how busy life is. So I appreciate you being on, Brianna. I will see you, I'm sure, in person very soon. And thank you so much. I'll put all the details in the show notes below for our listeners, and check out you guys have to check out her Instagram. Your Instagram is just incredible. It's just lively. It's not like the dry mortgage financial world. It is like real. You can understand it. It's exciting to learn about it. I think that's another thing, is making it exciting to learn about finance and how money works.
Well, if you think mortgages are exciting because of me, then that is the highest compliment. I
Oh,
always tell people I'm not a more normal mortgage broker. I'm a cool mortgage broker.
yeah, you're a cool mom.
Thank
Cool
you.
mortgage broker. I love it.
Thanks for having me, Nicole. It's been
Sounds
great.
good. We'll have you back on, like I said, because I think there's just so many subjects that I want to dive into. So thank you so much. Thanks,
My
Brianna.
pleasure.
Bye.